Hi, my name is Leandro Facchinetti, and in this video, I'm gonna try and make the case that you might not need a static website generator. Now, this is not to say that you don't need static websites. I still think that they are great. Most of my websites are static websites. I just think that sometimes using a static website generator is not the best way to create one of those. And when I say static website generator, I'm referring to tools like Jekyll and Gatsby, Next.js, Hugo, and many others. In fact, I have tried all of these and some more obscure ones like using org mode in Emacs. So I have a bit of experience in this area, and finally I realized after many years using many of these tools that sometimes the best thing to do is to just write a script that does all the things you want to do and that keeps things simple. By the end of the day, most of these static website generators are just that. They are stitching together libraries that do the different things that the static website generator does. So you might as well just stitch the libraries yourself and keep things simple. Of course, this lets you learn fewer things, which is awesome. It's always better to have fewer things to learn. You are only learning the underlying libraries instead of whatever the static website generator is bringing on top of them. Of course, it also has some downsides because people that are working on the website with you, they have to understand the script that you wrote, but sometimes the script is even shorter than some of the configuration files you would have to use to configure this static website generator. So I think that for smaller projects, this is better. And you don't have to learn things like GraphQL that you must learn if you want to use Gatsby. And you need to learn all the configuration parameters of all these static website generators. It's just no good. It's a lot more fun and sometimes productive to write a script and do things yourself. And that's what we are going to do here in this session of coding. We are going to go over some of the most important features from the static website generators, and we are going to recreate them using libraries. Most cases, we're just going to use some library. We don't have to write the code ourselves. We are going to go over a development server with live reload, how to render Markdown, how to pick up files from the file system, how to do some templating, how to enable syntax highlighting, and how to deploy the website. Let's start by creating a new project. So the first feature, and I think one of the most important ones in a static website generator, is a development server. Because you might open HTML files on a web browser, but there are some things that just don't work if you do that. And it's better to have a development web server, preferably one that allows you to see changes on the web browser without having to reload the page. I'm going to show you how that works using this tool called Live Server. I'm using JavaScript for this whole demonstration just because I think that JavaScript is the language that most people understand, even if they don't use it every day. They are able to read and understand what's going on. Also, it's the most popular programming language, so it's a good one to show these ideas in. But you must understand that these ideas transfer to other languages, other libraries, and tools. You're not limited to JavaScript to use this approach. This is just an example. So let's install Live Server and see how it changes the things on the browser without having to hit reload everything. So to begin with, I'm going to create a package JSON file that is empty. This is just so that when I install libraries like npm install live server, npm is going to record all the libraries that were installed here in this file. Meanwhile, I also want to create an index.html file. This is just so I have something to work with. So in this file, I'm going to create some basic HTML5 structure and heading that reads, "You might not need a static website generator." I'm going to make this a title. Now, here on the web browser, I can just open this file. I'm going to show how that works by saying open index.html. Here, the browser is just opening the file as file. But there are some things that, as I said, don't work if you do it this way. it is better to have a web server serving the file. So that's where the live server comes in. It is installed now, and it's just a tool that you can call from the command line. So here I can say npx to use the tool that was installed by npm live server, and now it has opened here. You can see that the material is the same, the page is the same, but the URL is different. Here it's opened as a file, and here it's opened as something that was fetched from the server, this server that is now running on my machine here on this. And what's cool about doing it this way is that, suppose I change, in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave here on the top right the version that was opened as a file, and here on the bottom right the version that was opened with live server. When I come here and change this to have a paragraph, and I save, you can see on the bottom, I didn't have to reload, I just saved. On the bottom you can see that it was updated. On the top I have to hit reload, which is annoying. When you are developing a website, you might be doing that thousands of times in an hour. So it's annoying to do that. It's better to have this live server. So you see, no big deal, just one library that I called, and I have a development server that has the live reload capability. Awesome. So let's move on to the next thing, which is rendering Markdown, because in most cases you don't want to write your HTML by hand. You want to use maybe Markdown, maybe some other tool like Textile or ASCII, just some ASCII format that you have, whatever. You probably don't want to author your content using HTML, but you want to serve the content as HTML, that is for sure. So let's write some Markdown version of this HTML and then render it using another library. I'm going to create here index.md, and I'm going to copy and paste my content while formatting it in a Markdown format. So I'm using significant white space here to represent a paragraph, and I'm using this to represent a heading. Okay, so now I have some Markdown file. And I want to render this. So I'm going to create a build script that is going to be called build.ts. I'm going to use some libraries to render Markdown into HTML. If you look for libraries to do this in Node.js, there are thousands of libraries. I'm going to go with the one that is the most popular. Also, it seems to be the one that is better with things like some very obscure cases where features interact. I found that some other libraries didn't work well, but Remark, the one I'm going to use, the most popular library for rendering Markdown in JavaScript, Remark got this right every time. It was following the common mark spec, which is the closest thing we have to a spec for Markdown, so I think it's the best one. Let's install and use this library. It is called Remark, and I also need Remark HTML, so Remark comes in bits and pieces and it's very modular. I want the core thing, which is able to parse it, Markdown, but I also want Remark HTML, which is the part that renders Markdown into HTML. You could do other things like don't even render it into HTML, just parse Markdown, lint Markdown, and produce Markdown. So that's another thing you could do with Remark, but we want to generate HTML, so that's why we need this second library. You can see here that npm also updated package. Excellent. So now we can use this library. So first thing I want to do is import these libraries. So Remark is require Remark and Remark HTML, Remark HTML. Good. I also want to read index.html from the file system, so it's convenient here to have in Node.js something to read files from the file system. I don't need a library to do this, it's just part of Node.js. So I can say read file sync index markdown, and this is an UTF-8 file. And this gives me the Markdown. Now to produce HTML, I'm going to call remark. I'm going to use remark HTML. I'm going to process remark. Okay, now there you go. And I'm going to process synchronously the contents of the Markdown. I'm going to get the contents out. To learn more about this interface, you can just go to remark.js.org, and there you will find the documentation with this line and how to even do other things with remark, of course. So here in HTML, I'll have the HTML version of the Markdown. Now something I can simply write to index HTML. So now I'm going to open this HTML file. I'm going to run the script for you. I'm also going to leave here the browser open so you can see what's going on. I'm going to run build.js and see how the HTML has changed. All that nice structure that we had with the head of the document and everything, it's all gone. I just have literally the material that was in the body here of the Markdown file. We will recover all that, but you can see here in the browser that the browser doesn't really care about that all that much, except maybe for the title. Everything else remains the same. So it's okay if we have just that for now. We will recover this as soon as we talk about templating. But first, I want to address something else, because your website probably doesn't have just one page. So let's create another page.markdown. And you also want another page.html to appear when you build the website. So here I'll have another page and another emoji. Maybe poop. Why not? So when building, you also want to build another page HTML. So to do that, let's go through the file system and find every Markdown file and convert every Markdown file to its corresponding HTML file. To do that, I'm going to install another library. This time it's called glob. You can see that I don't need to say npm install every time. I can say npm I, same thing, it's just shorter. So now with glob, I can first require it. And then so you can see here these hard-coded paths, they're gonna change because I'm going to create a loop for path of glob. I confess that I don't know how to use glob, so let's look at the documentation real quick. Okay, so glob is just a function. And I can say star star. It doesn't really matter where the file is in the project. I just want all Markdown files. And oh, I want this to return a list, not to call a function. Okay, so I call glob.sync. And I believe that because I didn't pass a function, a callback, it will return a list instead of calling the callback. I think that's how this is going to work. So this is going to return a list of paths. To test this out, I'm going to console log the path. I'm going to comment all these out for now and run, oops, not this. I will run build again, and yeah, this is finding all the Markdown files, including the Markdown files that are part of the documentation in the libraries that I installed. That's not what I want. So I will use another feature here from glob and ignore some patterns, because I believe there is another parameter I can pass that is an object of options. Yes, an object of options. So I can pass another argument here to ignore. And here I can just pass a list of patterns that I want to ignore. Yeah, add a pattern or an array of glob patterns to exclude. In that case, I want to exclude the pattern I believe if I just say node modules here, it may work. Let's see. No, it didn't work. So I'll have to spread some stars here. Maybe that will make it work. So no. How about without the trailing slash? And now we got this. So anything that is inside the node modules path, these are the libraries that we installed. Things like live server will be here somewhere. Yeah, it's right here. So those are the things that we want to ignore. We don't want the markdown files from here, just the ones that we created in our project. And now we have, so the path is there. I'm going to, again, copy these over here. And now every time where I say this index markdown, I don't want to say index markdown, I want to say the path. And here on the way out, I want to say the path, except that I don't want the whole path. I want to get this dot markdown part away. I don't want to have that. So I'm going to just split starting in 0 and ending in dot markdown length and the path length minus that. Believe that does the trick. Also, of course, I want to add a .html at the end. So here I'm going to put this all in a string and add HTML at the end. So this is what we have now. We are going to get the whole path, but we are going to remove the .md from the end. Let's see how that, I'm not too confident about this part. So let's see how this works by commenting all this out. And see if we have, here we have another page MD and an index MD. I expect to see another page.html and index HTML. And I have a syntax. I'm missing parentheses. Again. Oh, now I have lists. Oh, that's because I'm using split. I should use a slice. Okay. So here I have another page and index, and when I add the HTML part at the end, that will do the trick. Let's see this in the awesome. So there are better ways to do this. There is a whole library in Node.js to manipulate paths. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to do it the simple way, just by manipulating strings. This is just for demonstration anyway. So now we are building all files, and that includes the another page. So let's run the build script and see another page and HTML being created. So here it is. That's another page. We can open it in the browser by going to this URL and going to another. Okay, so here's another page. Boop. Awesome. So that shows you how to go through the file system and render all Markdown files into HTML. And yeah, this is not a lot of code. Next, let's move on to something else that is super important. And that is, we are not recreating the HTML that we started with, because there was all this boilerplate that should be the same in every page. So here in index and in another page and in all other pages, we should have the title of the website and some metadata on the head, and all that repeats. That's a template. And there are fancier ways to do this, but here is a very simple one. Instead of reading this file, we are going to, instead of creating a markdown just by reading this file, we are going to create a markdown by, so let's say that this is just the text of the thing, and the markdown is some template string in which we are going to interpolate the text. But we are also going to have everything else that was in the template. So let's change this. This quick and dirty way to do this is to just change this back, this mode, instead of JavaScript. I'll be writing some HTML now. And now Visual Studio Code thinks that I'm writing HTML, so I can say HTML5. It will complete things for me. It will render things for me like that. I can paste the text that was rendered into the body right here. And I'm going to do it like this, just so I can write some other things. For instance, I can have a header, and I can write this in Markdown, because Markdown is a superset of HTML, so anything that is valid HTML is also valid Markdown. So here I can write like my website without a static website generator. And maybe the text of the program should be the main. Okay, so now we are more or less recreating. Oh, I also want to have the title on my web. I don't think I had that before, so I'm going to copy this, or actually I'm going to copy this, which is like the heading of the website. So now let's try to build again and take a look at index.html. It has all that structure, and another page also has all that structure. So everything that repeats is now repeating on every page. That's super simple. That's how it works. So here on another page, you can see my website without a static web. And here as well. By the way, there are many tags that are optional in HTML5. So for instance, you don't need a head tag. You don't need the body tag. You don't even need to close the HTML tag. So this is like a minimal HTML that you have to write to make this work and still be valid. Great. There's yet another thing that I want to do here, and that is anytime I save this file, I would like build to just run again, right? I don't want to have to come here every time and do this over and over every time that change the script, or even that I change some of the pages here. Because here you can see that when I save the markdown file, let's put another emoji here. I save the markdown file, and I don't see any changes on the page because I am not running node build.js again. So when I do that and come here, then I see it. Okay, but that's annoying. I would like to run the build.js script every time I change the markdown file or the JavaScript or whatever else that may change the outputs of the website. I'll come back here to change the mode from HTML back to JavaScript. And I'm going to use another library to do this. And this library is called NodeMon. I think it stands for node monitoring. It monitors the file changes in the file system, and then it triggers some program. In this case, the program is going to be the build script. So here in the package.json, I'm going to configure how to make this work. And I'm going to wait until npm updates this file so I don't try to concurrently update it and mess things up. Okay, there you have it. So now I'm going to create a script, and I'm going to call this script start. And what this script does is node monitor for the extension. JS and Markdown. So it picks up Build.js and all the Markdown pages. And what it's going to run is going to be the Build.js script. To make this work, I am going to, well, there are many ways to do this really. You can come here to npm scripts and it will be here. The start script is here. You can do this on the command line. You can say npm start. There are many ways to do this. My favorite way is to come here to terminal and configure default build task and say that it is npm start. So now I can just come here in Visual Studio Code and run build task, or even better, use this shortcut. Just hit the keys and it starts to monitor all the JavaScript and Markdown files. And anytime I do something here and change, like remove that emoji, I save, it runs Build.js again. Here is the. It would also be nice if this not only ran every time that I am changing something, but also it would be nice if it started the live server for me. So here I have the live server running on another tab. What if instead of having to do all this, I could just say to people, yeah, what you have to do is just run the start task and it will do everything for you. That would be nice. So I want to do two things. I want npm start to do two things. I want it to start the live server, but also start the node monitoring thing. So to do these two things, I'm going to install another library called concurrently. Okay, concurrently is installed, and I can use it by saying concurrently do this and live server. Note how before here on the command line I had to say npx live server, but because this is already running in the context in which the libraries are available, I don't have to do that. I can just do this. Now I can again hit the keystroke Command Shift B to build, and that starts the server. The live server is running, and so you can see here that the live server is running. And anytime I change anything, or even I just come here and save, it will run the build again. Pretty cool. Next, let's talk about syntax highlight. If you're writing blog posts for things like the thing that I'm doing right now, technical things like that, you probably want syntax highlighting. So let's look at how things are working right now, just using Remark to render HTML. I am going to grab some of my JavaScript code here. I'm going to paste it here, just so we have something to look at. And it's not doing any syntax highlighting. Annoying, right? You would want some syntax highlighting going on here. Well, let's just use another library. And the one I'm going to use this time, it's called Cheeky. And it's not a super popular one. I don't think that many people use this, but it's a gem. It's awesome. The way it works is it uses Visual Studio Code to render the thing. So you have access to all your Visual Studio Code themes and syntax highlighters. And it just gets right all the things that other syntax highlighters don't get right. It is like the real thing here. It's as if you were opening the thing on the web, on the text editor. It does the right thing. So that is the one I use for my website. So I'm going to install Cheeky, and I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. But anyway, so while it is installing, we can start to write the program or change the Vue.js so that it uses Cheeky. So here I'm just going to require it. Now there is a trick. To start using Cheeky, you have to get the syntax highlighter. I'm going to call this like the highlighter, or maybe syntax highlighter. I'm going to say Cheeky get highlighter. And here I have to pass a theme. I use Light Plus when I'm coding, so I want Light Plus for my website as well. There is a trick here. this is asynchronous. And I'm writing a script, so I would like to just say await here, but this doesn't work in JavaScript as of now. It will in the near future, but it doesn't work right now. So the trick to make this work is either you do it like this, which I dislike, because then you have this extra indentation here all over the place, and it's kind of messy. I just don't like it. I prefer to use async await. So the trick to do this on a script is to declare a function. I'm going to declare this function and say that it's asynchronous. And then you immediately call that asynchronous function. And because it is an asynchronous function, you can use await just fine in that function. So I can just copy this whole thing and I wrap the whole program in this asynchronous function that is immediately called. And now I can use await. Awesome. So now I have the syntax highlighter. Next, what I want to do is to use this syntax highlighter on all code blocks. Let's look at how this code block translated into HTML right now. It is just this pre tag with a code tag in it with a class of language.js. Okay. How do I manipulate this HTML so that I can use the syntax highlighter on it? This is probably the biggest trick up my sleeve to write this script. We are going to use a technique that I don't see many people using. I don't think I saw like more than 2 people using on the internet, but it's a super cool technique, super simple to use. The idea here is that we are going to pretend that we are a browser and we are going to render this HTML and we are going to manipulate it using the DOM libraries and APIs, or really APIs, not libraries, the DOM APIs that you would use in a browser. So when I'm in the browser here, I can toggle the inspector and I can write things like document, query, selector all, and I can select all. I can select all code tags. I'm going to change the delimiters here. I can select all the code tags that have a class that starts with language something. Of course, this one is language.js because I said here that the language was JS. If I said something else, I would see something else. But they all start with language dash. So here I have in the browser something to work with. I have this node list to work with. Awesome. I would like to do that here in Vue.js. Why would I want to do this? Well, because I can use the same techniques I would use in the browser when generating my static website. It's a super cool trick because it's just one language, one API, the DOM API, and if you do something for the web, you may already know this API. It's super simple to use and it's very well documented. You can find documentation for this all over the place. So let's use something that allows us to manipulate this HTML right here as if it was in the browser already. Now, of course, I guess I could just put a script tag here and do some stuff, but then this would only be rendered in the browser. And if you disable JavaScript in the browser, you're no good. And if you're doing a lot of syntax highlighting on the page, then you are no good. In mobile devices, it would be too slow. That's a bad idea. Instead, what we are going to do is just manipulate everything, all the HTML here, in the server in Vue.js before rendering the HTML, and the rendered HTML will not have any JavaScript in it. Let's see how to do this. Well, I'm going to use a library called JSDOM. And while it's installing, I will require it here. Now, when I have the HTML, I'm going to, I don't know what to call this yet. I'm going to create a new JS DOM with HTML. Now I have access to some of the APIs by using the, I don't know what to call this. Guess I may call it like DOM. I don't know. This is probably a bad name. But here I have the window and the document. In case you don't know this, here when you're in the browser you're saying document, you're actually saying window document. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm getting the document, and then I can write things like this. In the script that I'm using to build, I'm going to console log this just so you get a chance to see what's going on. So I'm seeing some node lists here. I don't know why they are not showing this right here. This node list is not empty and this node list is empty. Not sure what's going on there. So instead of doing it this way, I'm going to say for const code block off this. I am going to console log a code block. Maybe that will work better. Okay, that's an HTML element, so I can see that I'm getting the HTML element here. I can also do something real quick just to demonstrate that it's working. I can remove that from here. And of course, when rendering the HTML to a file, I don't want to render the original HTML. I want to render this DOM thing. And there is a serialize method that I can call. It comes with JS DOM. It turns the modified DOM into a string. So now I save, and then on the background, nodemon is making sure that we run the node script again, the build script again, and here you can see that it is gone. The text box, the pre part, the thing that was showing code, is gone. Awesome. So this is work. But that's not really what we want to do. We don't want to remove the code. What we want to do is to call the syntax highlighter and get some syntax highlighted material to put in place, to replace with the original block. So the code block has... Oh, and I should mention, this remove method I use, it is just the API that comes with the browser to manipulate DOM, the document object model. It's just part of that API, and I'm using it here. So now I can say code block, and I'm going to use another part of that API that is to get the content of that block. So I'm going to console log that, see how that comes out. Okay, so this is better. This is printing just the material in the code block. So just the material that you find here. So now we are in a position to actually call Cheeky and do some syntax highlighting. So we can call code to HTML and say Cheeky code. Oh, actually, I want to use this syntax highlighter instantiated here. The syntax highlighter, and I want to use the code to HTML thing with the contents of the code block. And I see that the output of Cheeky here is a pre tag, but the pre tag was the parent of the code tag that I targeted. So I want to replace the parent of the thing I'm targeting with the outputs of Cheeky. So I can say code block parent element and alter HTML to replace the whole thing with the outputs of the syntax highlighter code HTML. Now we save this. And oh yeah, when I call code to HTML, I should say what the language is. The language is coming from the class. Here you can see that it's language dash something. So here in my build script, I am going to call this with the code block and then maybe the class name, and I'm going to slice this on language dash length. Try this again. Now no errors are being thrown here, which is great. And you can see that the outputs here are now produced by Cheeky. And on the page, I have some awesome syntax highlighting going on here. Excellent. So that is syntax highlighting for you. For my final trick, I want to talk about deployment. Usually, you have some contraption to deploy your website. You have a source folder and then a destination folder. If you're using static website generators, they may be complicated to, you may have to have a branch with the produced HTML, and then you configure some web server to deploy that. If you're using GitHub Pages, it's easy to have a branch that is the source and another one that is the produced HTML files. It can be kind of messy. So to keep things simple, in the spirit of you might not need a website generator, you might not need that separation. You may just want to have the HTML files in your Git repository, and you push, let's say, to GitHub Pages, and it's going to serve the HTML files, and that is it. So just to make this clear, I will say no Jekyll. And when you create this file and you push this to GitHub and you enable GitHub Pages, this will just work. You have no extra work to do this here. You're just saying, I'm not using any static website generator. That is the whole point. And GitHub Pages is going to deploy this by just looking at the HTML files. Of course, it's also going to deploy the Markdown files. So if you go to some web page that is using this technique, for instance, my website, and you look at index.md, yeah, it is serving the source of the website, but whatever, who cares, right? Unless you know this, you won't go there. And if you go there, then good for you, whatever. Your website may already be public on GitHub anyway, mine is. So there is that. You might not need a static website generator. And that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching.